In this video, we're going over one edit distance. So given two strings s and t, return true if they are both one edit distance apart, otherwise return false. A string s is said to be one distance apart from a string t if you can insert exactly one character into s to get t, delete exactly one character from s to get t, or replace exactly one character of s with a different character to get t. So in our first example, we're given a and b and acb, and we return true because we can insert the character c into a and b to get acb. Let's go over the dot process. So if the difference, we will first need to determine the lengths x and y of the two input strings. If the length has a difference of greater than 1, then we know it is not one edit distance apart. If x and y are the same, we will need to check if there is exactly one difference between the two strings. This is because we can replace exactly one character of s with a different character to get t. So if the two strings have the same length, we want to check if there's exactly one character that's different. Now if x and y are different and has a distance or a difference of exactly 1, we can perform the two other operations. We can either insert exactly one character into s to get t, which means putting in one character into the shorter character to get t, or deleting exactly one character is basically removing one character from the longer string to get t. We will have two choices: the insert and delete. We will want to check if there is exactly one modification we can make. Now let's go over the pseudocode. So we will first validate the input parameter. If the difference of the length of the two input strings is greater than 1, then we can return false because they are not one edit distance apart. Now we want to check if both of the strings have the same length. We want to check if we can replace exactly one character. So in this case here. So we're going to create a variable difference to keep track of the number of different characters. Then we're going to iterate through the indices of s and t, or just s because they're the same length anyways. Denote it as I. If the current two characters at index I are not the same, we can increment the difference. Now after going through all the characters, we'll only return true if difference is equal to 1. Else we can just return false. Now if the difference of the two strings is exactly 1, so we can say difference of the lengths is exactly 1. We want to check if we can insert a character or delete a character. But before, we're going to create the following variables. We're going to have a shorter string, the shorter of the two input strings, and then we have a longer, the longer of the two input strings, and then we're going to create our two indices, I current index inside shorter, and we'll have j is the current index inside longer. Now while the longer pointer is not out of bound, we're gonna check the current two characters. If the current two characters Actually, if I is not a bound and j is not a bound, we need to check both. If the current two characters are not the same, we will want to move the pointer for the longer pointer, for the longer string. We want to move the pointer for the longer string, because if we move the pointer for the longer string, it counts as deleting exactly one character, and it will also means inserting exactly one character. Because think about it, if we move j, we're going to skip the current character. If they're not the same, that means we're removing the current character inside the longer. And then if we try to insert exactly one character, this means we have already matched the current character inside the longer string. So we can also, so it'll also count as an insert. But if I and j are not equal to each other, this means we have already performed the insert or delete previously. So we're going to return false. Then we're going to increment just our longer pointer, or the pointer inside our longer string. Else, we can increment both I and j because they are matching strings. Then we can return true if we can perform exactly one modification. Now let's go over the time and space complexity. For the time complexity is all of. So the first one is we iterate through the all of the strings. So it's O of n if they're the same length. And the next one is also O of n, but the worst case is O of n plus 1, but which is still O of n. So it's going to O of n, where n is the length of the longer string. You visit each index once. Our space complexity is O of 1. Now let's go over the code. So we'll first check the input parameter. So if the difference between the two strings is greater than 1, this means they are not one edit distance away. So we can just return false. Now if the lengths are the same, we want to check if we can perform exactly one replacement. And then else, we want to check if they have exactly one modification. Now we'll first check has one replacement for the two strings. This is basically checking if there's exactly one difference or one different character between the two strings. So we're going to create a variable difference is equal to 0. Then we iterate through the indices of s. Both of the strings have the same length. So if the current character is not equal to current character in t, then we can increment the difference. Then we only return true if difference is equal to 1. So we can perform exactly one replacement. Now we need to implement our other method, which is our one modification. So we will first need to check the shorter string. Then we want to find the longer string. We just need to swap the parameters. Then we're going to create two variables to indicate our current index inside the shorter and the longer. So while I is less than s.length and j is less than t.length. So if the current characters are not the same, we want to move the longer pointer. Oh, it's actually shorter and longer. If the current character are not the same, we want to move the longer pointer. But if I is not equal to j, this means we have already moved the longer pointer before. So there's currently two modifications. So we cannot make two modifications, so we have to return false. Then we can increment j, and then otherwise we can increment both of the pointers. Then we can return true after checking through all of the characters. Let me know if any questions in the comment section below.